There we
Can you
go.
hear me now? Yeah, good. Okay.
Don, we are now live.
We're all live. There you go. Good to go. Good morning from the lovely village of Halliburton in the Halliburton Highlands. Welcome to this Committee of Adjustment meeting for March the 10th, 2021. Now the meeting will be called to order. The notice to all those in attendance that this meeting will be live streamed on YouTube and recorded. And please note that the recording will be linked to the municipal website following the meeting. Our committee today consists of Mr. David Bishop, Mr. Gerald Walker, Mr. Walter McKechnie, and in attendance with me is Mr. Jeff Isles, who is the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment, and Danielle is the Deputy Secretary Treasurer, and Chris Orsa, the Senior Planner, will also be listening in. This is a public hearing to hear 5 applications for a minor variance to municipality zoning bylaw. It's the committee's responsibility to consider all information received to date regarding the requested variances and to hear and consider any comments or questions provided by these applications. Any variances granted by the committee must meet 4 tests, which are very clearly defined in the Planning Act. The requested variance must be minor in nature, desirable for the property development of the land, comply with the general intent of the official plan, and comply with the general intent of the zoning bylaw. Anyone wishes to be notified of the decision, please make a request in writing to the municipality. Next question is, does any committee member have a conflict of interest with any of the applications today? Please indicate by holding your hand if you do. Gerald, you have a conflict today with one of these applications?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I thought you wanted, I do not have a,
So we're good to go?
put my hand up the wrong time.
Okay, it's all right, fair enough. Let's see now, where are we going from here? Well, I think we're ready to go, huh?
Yep.
So before we get on with the nuts and bolts of the meeting, we have I need to clear up the adoption of the minutes for the Committee of Adjustment meeting of the 10th of February 2021. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Mr. McKechnie, seconded by Mr. Bishop. All in favor? It's carried. Site visit minutes to Trappers Trail, February the 19th, 2021. Someone moved we adopt the minutes to that meeting. Moved by Mr. Walker, second by Mr. Bishop. All in favor? That motion is carried. So first application that we're going to deal with today is a returning fire, Mr. Melchenko of 1747 Trappers Trail. And Mr. Chan, are you available there? See you.
I just brought him into the meeting.
Yes, I'm here. Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
My video is not working. Sorry.
That's all right. As you are aware, we attended the site visit, and among other people, we spoke to, I guess, Mr. Melchenko and the contractor.
Yes.
And the results of that meeting were that there were 2 variances applied for. Okay. We had no problem with the back corner as I anticipate, and we did have a problem with the front deck of the building and the location of it relative to the septic system and everything else. And the owner agreed that he didn't need that porch on there.
I revised the plans and resubmitted to Danelle the other day, reducing the. I shifted the deck outside of the setback, and the drawings were submitted.
Jeffrey?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chen. And yes, based on the comments and concerns, the applicants have submitted an updated site plan without that deck encroaching on the east side.
We have to deny it, right?
That's right. So it appears they're no longer requesting that variance, so we can deny it, and then you just have to concentrate on the variance on the west.
Okay, so members of the committee, we're going to deal with the 3 variances that were asked, that were applied for. First one is an increased provision of section 3.7 to permit a deck attached to a main building to extend into the east interior side lot setback of 3.2 meters as opposed to requirement minimum of 0 meters. Looking for a motion to either accept or deny that.
Mr. Chair, I think that does refer to the deck that he has changed at the back corner. If that is the case, I'll move that we deny that setback.
Okay, is there a seconder for that, please? Mr. Bishop? All in favor of that? Carried. Decrease provision of section 5.2 to permit a seasonal dwelling to have a west interior lot line setback of 1.67 meters, as opposed to required 4.5 meters. Is there a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved in favor to grant it.
Thank you.
Seconded by Mr. Bishop and seconded by Mr. Walker. That's carried. An increase provision 5.2 to permit a seasonal dwelling to have a maximum structure height of 12.86 meters as opposed to required 9.5 meters. Have a mover to accept that. Moved by Mr. Bishop and seconded by Mr. McKechnie, and it's granted. We're good to go.
Thank you very much.
We still don't see you, but you have a wonderful voice.
Oh, well, thank you. I was having difficulty with the video all month with the Zoom meetings every time, so I'm not sure what's going on. I might have to reinstall it, but it's good to see everybody. I hope everyone have a good day. Thank you.
There is an appeal period, as you're probably aware of 20 days.
Okay, understood.
I don't think it's going to affect anything you're doing as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your application and for your cooperation.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Second application is Mr. Mendoza from Pike Lane. And we have Clinton. Clinton,
I'm just bringing him into the
we
meeting.
can't hear you.
How about now?
Oh, you're good.
There we go.
So we're a little bit confused with respect to this application, because what we had asked for is a resubmission based on what we thought would be something that we could take a look at. We don't have that, but my understanding is that you want us to go back to what the original application was. Is that correct?
Not exactly. And hopefully I can have a moment here just to kind of explain. It was asked by us, by the committee last time we were at this meeting, about shifting the property and seeing if there was some sort of modification to still work within the confines of the requirements of the bylaw. So we did go back and we took a look at that. What we discovered, based on the comment that was asked by Mr. Bishop about the location of Part 8, that the parking that we have allotted, we were asked to move it to salvage some vegetation. And when it was shifted over, we found that it is already at its extent as its proximity to Part 8. So the idea of shifting the building farther forward and still maintaining parking at the front of the property is not a possibility. There's no space to move that parking any farther in. Otherwise, we would be on the actual laneway, or what is derived to be the laneway of Part 8 through that section. So we are, again, as we've been throughout this entire process, more than willing to be accommodating towards what the committee has requested, what the community has requested in regards to maintaining vegetation and meeting safety and health requirements, meeting those parking requirements, and meeting the requirements for the setbacks to the best that we can. However, with the intention that we could continue with the design, the idea behind what we wanted to create. And what we're asking to create, I don't think is an unreasonable size or design, even in comparison to some of the other properties in the general area. Most of the other cottages on that street, if they were to demolish today and rebuild, would be able to build exactly the type of cottage that we're asking to build, and only based on the fact that the requirements across that waterway. We've been willing to make the concessions of knocking down ancillary buildings as well too that are within that 10-meter setback to try and offset the amount of gross floor area and the amount of building space that's within that 10-meter area. So with respect, Chair, what we're presenting today is sort of a combination of what was sent this last week, as well as what we saw before. The idea of maintaining the purity of the design that we would like to create, but with the willingness to meet the requirements for vegetation, for the existing vegetation that's there, for meeting the parking requirements, the health and safety requirements, for meeting the drainage, the parking, everything else that was asked of us by the committee. And I hope that you take that into consideration when we were looking at this again.
But if we go back to the original application, I don't think that the committee is going to be too very much interested in allowing the height for starters and the expansion of the property. What we said was, we'll allow you, if you take the storage shed and get rid of it, we'll allow you to increase the square footage of your building to include that. Come back to us with a plan, but we have no plan. So if you want us to go back to this original document, you're not going to be real happy about what probably you're going to hear. Because unfortunately, this is what you're looking for is to overdevelop an underdeveloped lot. The lot's not very big. That's not my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you don't want to resubmit a new plan, and you want us to go back to these original requests, is that what you want us to do?
Well, again, with respect,
I'm
Chair,
very happy with the decision. I can pretty much tell you that right now.
mm-hmm. My understanding, and maybe there's been a miscommunication on all this, but my understanding was we were always willing to make the concession of removing that ancillary building, that boathouse or structure that was there, with the intention that we could offset to create the structure that was here, or what was presented.
Where's the plan?
Well,
We agreed that you could have the square footage that structure is added to your building, and you would resubmit a plan that we would look at and deal with at that point. But we have no plan.
Okay. Well, my understanding is that the structure. So, if I understand you correctly, Chair, you're saying that the existing structure is, I believe, about 4.5 meters in width. The structure that was off to the side here was roughly about 3 meters in width. So you're looking for something in and around the range of about 7.5 meters then for the width across the front. Is that what I am to understand?
If that's what the width of that thing was, of that shed, yeah. Just a minute, we have some other we'll just hear from a couple of the other committee members. Mr. Bishop first.
The concept, as I understood what we discussed, was that the original design that he had submitted, or that the applicant had submitted, was technically a building that just didn't fit on what factually was an undersized lot, and there was increased or decreased sideline requirements and the concerns in regard to the loss of the vegetation at the front. The situation is we've got a very small undersized lot, and when we were out there, I said, you know, if you can come up with a design that could accommodate some of the concerns of the neighbors as to these sidelines and the front preservation of trees, keeping in mind that you have an actual registered right-of-way going through your property, which has a limit that you can't use for parking or whatnot, then put that design in front of us and accommodate some of the process and some of the things we said as regard to the neighbors. Neighbors, you have to understand as well that there may be some requirement of some accommodation here. But if we go back to the exact first plan, there's no accommodation whatsoever. There's been no concession whatsoever in that regard. And factually, to try and go back to that original design is an overbuild on an undersized parcel, which you, Mr. Chair, have said that parcel was created, they bought it that way, and they've used it that way. That is no problem of the committee, but it's a problem in trying to overdevelop that lot.
With respect, Mr. Chair, through you, I did present a further plan that was provided to the planning department that was supposed to get into the hands of the committee this week. And I think maybe that's where there might be some miscommunication. I don't know if you've seen the version in which we have moved the building over. We took into consideration where the parking was and moved it farther to the west, that it had to be adjusted slightly due to the fact that we had showed the parking slightly into part 8. The building would have to be at the same distance away from the water that the existing structure was. And there was a vegetative growth line that was presented across the water line to prevent erosion. It sounds as though that might not have gotten into your hands. And I'm wondering if maybe that's, as what I was trying to present earlier was the fact that I presented this to the planning department this week or this last week, and we have the existing plan. We'd like to try and make sort of a concession and compromise and work within the confines of basically what both of these are presenting, with the intent that obviously at the point in which we submit, that the site plan that we submit would meet the confines of whatever the committee decided today.
Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Clinton. That plan you did submit is on the agenda today.
Okay.
So it's available for the public and the committee. When it was submitted to staff, staff did review the plan, and we advised you that there were some concerns, specifically that you could not park on a right-of-way to our understanding. In addition, that the new proposed plan would also require recirculation as per the Planning Act. So we would have to put it back in the paper and recirculate to the neighbors. So, and that's when, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's when you advised us that you wanted us to proceed back with the original proposal as submitted, which is before the committee today.
Through you, Chair, I think there might be some confusion about that, and that's where we've gotten to this point. So the intention was to look at the plan that was submitted this past week with the intention that it obviously could not shift that 6 feet north, that the building would still have to remain at the same distance away from the water line, but with the intention that the setback on the west side would be 4.5 meters, that the parking would remain on that side. Basically, Chair, through you, we wanted to ensure that we weren't going to be pushed back another month simply because of the building being shifted up in this drawing, when we could easily discuss the fact that it was actually going to be at the same distance away from the water line, however, not in the exact original location.
Well, unfortunately, the committee hasn't seen that. Did you wish to comment, Mr. Walker?
Fine. So on your resubmitted plan, what is the square footage in comparison with the original building? We don't have a copy of it, but you can probably let us know what that square footage is. So are you still submitting the original square footage that you from the initial application?
So through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is the intent. That our goal throughout all of this was to keep the purity of the design that the client was intending, something that would be desirable for the neighborhood, that is not an overly large size building. We've presented the same design and have not altered the design of the structure itself, but have been working with the concessions of moving it over, meeting the erosion concern, meeting the vegetation concern, meeting the parking concern that has been presented to us. We have gone back and we have looked at this property to see if there was any way in which we could build something that would still meet the client's purposes for the property. And I don't know if you saw the notes that I had presented to the planning department the other day, summarizing my key aspects of all this. But for us to be able to build a structure on here, we would either have to go to a 3-story building to create the same square footage as what is desired, which I don't think would be desirable for the neighborhood and would involve another variance. And essentially we would create a snout house, something that would be larger at the back and very small at the front near the waterway, which I don't think would really be desirable for the waterfront nor for the clients.
So if I understand correctly, the building that you have re-proposed is larger than the existing footprint plus the square footage of the shed
I don't think you said that.
as recommended.
So yes, the structure that we have we presented is a 10 meter by 10 meter structure. It is larger than the existing cottage that's on the property and the boathouse combined. The intention is, again, as I said, with the willingness to make the concessions of knocking these structures down to allow us to build what we would prefer to build.
Hey, Jeff.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify, because when we were submitted that document, and perhaps there was a misunderstanding, but we did advise that we did need more information before we could proceed with that updated design. As I mentioned again, we needed updated square footage being increased with the water setback. This would probably affect the variance for lot coverage as well. And it may require recirculation through the Planning Act. So we haven't fully reviewed that updated plan. So at this point, staff are not quite sure exactly what's being requested.
So through you, Mr. Chair, again, the amount of square footage that would be within that 10 meter setback from the water, the width that was originally requested within that 10 meter setback, that has not changed. It is shifted to accommodate the parking. We did want to shift it farther away to decrease that amount, which is what was shown in this plan. Unfortunately, due to the fact of where the parking needs to go to save vegetation, which I know was a concern of the community, there's just no way of moving the parking any closer towards that laneway without it being within the confines of the laneway.
Well, in fairness to the committee, I now have the document in front of me, but we were always concerned about the amount of increase there was going to be, and it appears to me that you've developed a pretty good sized building out of this. But in fairness to everyone else, we're talking about something they don't know anything about. If you want us to consider this, does he have to recirculate it?
And that's a good question. As per that plan, it does require a recirculation as per the Planning Act, because the building is a little closer to the side lot line than the original submission. Again, we had this conversation with Clinton, and he advised us to go ahead with the plan as submitted. So we're not exactly sure what's being requested, Clinton, right now with regards to lot coverage, square footage within the water setback, and the side lot line. I admit maybe there was a bit of misunderstanding, but I'm a little confused as well what's being
Can
asked.
we defer it, can we defer it to the next meeting and get everybody to look at it?
So again, Mr. Chair, through you, what we saw in the original application as far as the amount of gross floor area within that 10-meter area, the width of the building, the height of the building, none of that has changed. And that has always been our goal throughout the meetings and discussions with the committee and with the community, is that we could maintain the size of the structure that we would prefer to build, with the intention that we can make the concessions that the committee and the community both required of us. And I think that in many respects, we have been willing to make those concessions, but those gross floor areas and widths and height have not changed as far as the size of the structure. Simply what we're discussing is that the structure would be shifted over to reduce the side lot line a bit on the west side, which would open it up a bit more on the one side to allow that parking to be on the west side, which was a concern of the community.
Mr. Bishop?
Mr. Chair, I'm having some problems here without seeing what is being talked about in terms of a new bit of design. I can't put my mind's eye to it whatsoever.
I understand
But
that.
notwithstanding that, we have this correspondence from the applicant. And when I read that through, he's basically saying that he wants to go back to the same requirements of asking for relief that are set forth in his original application. The applicant is referring to concessions. I see no concessions in here whatsoever. But without seeing what he's asking us to put our mind to, I can't do it at this point in time. And as it appears through our Secretary Treasurer, the new plan, whatever it is, has to be recirculated if he wants to keep it alive at this basis. If he wants a decision today, I don't know if that's what he wants today or not, but you could put the question to the applicant, Mr. Chair.
Well, I don't think we can decide this today because nobody's seen it. Like, the only document we can refer to today is the original application. If that's what you want to vote on and take a look at, then we're prepared to do that. But I think we're kind of going around in a circle here.
Through you, Mr. Chair, then, just so I can have some clarification to go back with, because I want to make sure that I'm not wasting any of the committee's time, that we don't have to go through this month after month. We've spent a lot of time discussing this, and I want to ensure that we can meet the requirements that the committee is asking for, as well as the community, and find some common ground for my client who wishes to get building, who would have loved to have broken ground in April, but I know that's not going to probably happen. If I understand correctly, you are looking for a building that is going to be an offset of the same area and width as the boathouse on top of the existing structure of the cottage for width. Is that a fair assessment?
We said we would give you the square footage of the boathouse and the original cottage. You can add those two together. And that's what we were supposed to get a return back on. Is that not correct, Mr. Walker?
That's correct. We did not mention anything about width. We were talking total square footage between the existing cottage and the existing storage boathouse. And your design was to satisfy, give you an opportunity to meet some of the setbacks. And we also wanted to see the building regress to the north and somewhere in the 6 to 8 foot range, if possible. And I think that's what we discussed, mutually agreed on.
That's correct. Mr. Bishop?
I concur with Mr. Walker's comments in that regard, Mr. Chair. And in addition, we specifically spoke to come up with a design that maybe you can cut back the infringement into the sideline requirements that you've got there and see how we can really protect those trees at the front. And the concept was that a new design would be proposed that would incorporate in it the area of the boathouse that's going to be taken down. And that's where, along with what Mr. Walker said, I believe we were at.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe there must have been some miscommunication about that. My understanding and my intent has always been to keep the purity of the original design with the opportunity to make the concessions that were requested of us. I know that, again, Mr. Bishop had presented last time the concern of going back and seeing if there was some way of modifying the design. And as I had pointed out through the previous comments there, that to do so would create a bit of a monstrosity, a bit of an ill-shaped structure that would have to be widened at the back and narrower at the front, creating sort of that snout house effect. But I am willing to go back with the client and discuss about this. I just want to make sure that I'm 100% clear on all the details to make sure that, again, we're not wasting any time at our next committee meeting about this. In regards to the height requirement, that we are increasing the height. Is there any concerns from the committee of us being able to do that, as the design of this structure was only a single story that was open all the way up? So we were not increasing the square footage of that area.
Walker?
I think we were, part of that requirement was to keep it within the bylaw of the building code. So we were not going to grant any increase in height over top of the, as a minor variance. And one question for Jeff, if I could. If the client was to resubmit a drawing with our request being the square footage increase of the existing building and the boathouse, and he could redesign that on the lot, would that have to be recirculated to the public, or could we deal with it at the next meeting?
Thanks, Jerry. It's difficult to say. We can review the plan once submitted just to see if any further variances are required. So as per the Planning Act, we've circulated for 4 requested variances. As long as the new design isn't further encroaching upon those variances, then we won't need to recirculate. The committee can always.
So if I understand your statement, then as long as those setbacks are within what's been asked for the original proposal, it will not have to be recirculated. Is that true?
Correct. The committee can always compromise a lesser standard, but not more without recirculating.
Okay. Is that understood by the applicant then? You should,
I believe
hopefully
so.
you could redesign inside of the asked for setbacks and with those square footages in mind, and that way we don't have to recirculate and we could probably do the decision at the next meeting. Is that fair?
So through you, Mr. Chair, just for clarification, only the area and height within the 10 meters are the focal points of our concern here, that we keep within the area of what the boathouse is within 10 meters, what the existing cottage is within 10 meters, and the height of the existing cottage within that 10 meters. And as long as we are not infringing any further on any setbacks, lot coverage, or anything else that has already been presented to the committee, then we would be able to deal with this at the next meeting.
That's correct. That's my page, Mr. Bishop.
The only concern we had with respect of the 10 meters was to ensure a methodology of protecting the trees at the front on the lake side, and that if there was the using the 10 meters to take all steps that are available to preserve those trees.
Through you, Chair, just for clarification about what Mr. Bishop said there. So if I understand correctly, you said that the area and height were supposed to remain as they are, virgin, if you will. From what Mr. Bishop was saying there, I'm a little bit confused, because it sounds as though we can make the concession of width and height as long as it doesn't interfere with those trees. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding what's being said there?
We're not interested in increasing the height.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so someone, if we move to defer to the next meeting, pending the receipt of the documents. Would you move that, Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Seconded by Mr. Bishop. All in favor? Carried. Okay, we'll look forward to that, and we'll meet again.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you,
Thank
committee.
you very much. Next, we deal with Mr. McCoy on the Kawagama Lake Island. Are you hooked in here, Mr. McCoy?
I'm just bringing him in.
So it's deferred, Jeff, okay?
Okay, yeah, I got that.
Hi, Mike. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry about that. Yeah. Hello.
Mr. McCoy, welcome to Halliburton.
Thank you.
Are you in Toronto?
I'm in Whitby actually. So
Modern technology is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
yeah, this works.
So we have received your application with respect to your property in Havelock Township. And quite frankly, I think the committee would like to visit your property. And I know that's going to hold things up, but I think that's what we're going to come up with. But we'd like to hear what you have to say, and then we'll carry on from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess there's an existing building on the property, and I'd like to remove that building, move everything back beyond the 10-meter mark, because right now that existing building is within the 10-meter mark. And then I'd like to, our frontage, we'd like to go up to 66.5 feet. And the reason for that is because we have a screened-in porch on the one side. So that's a 12-foot wide screened-in porch. So that takes us to above or beyond the 60 feet, I guess, that's allowed. And I don't really want to go back too far because there's a lot of trees that I'd rather not get rid of, and it'd kind of make the lot pretty barren if I had the existing footprint cleared as well as beyond that. So so the new footprint would take up, I guess, the existing footprint of the one building, and then also one building that I'm relocating. It'd take up that area as well. So
I guess what we're interested in is the possibility, we're interested in preserving the prestige of the shoreline as much as we can.
yeah.
What we want to see, I think, is are there alternatives? Are there other alternatives for you? And that's why I think the committee probably would be interested in going to the property, but I don't think we can do that till the spring.
Yeah, no, the ice is in right now, but it's some warm weather here. It's probably, I don't know, it's probably a month away, but still probably isn't too safe after a few weeks. So if we'd like to do that, we can do that. There is existing trees along the shoreline, so it is hidden a little bit, and I can share some photos with the committee there as well. But again, the existing cottage, there's no trees there, obviously. So
You don't have anything growing up through your floor or anything?
no.
But are you okay with that? Is that like you probably want to move ahead this summer? Do you? Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the idea. So I'd like to apply for permit in the spring here, and the existing building, I'd like to remove it as soon as possible. It's right now I have everything kind of cleared out and ready to remove for the spring. So it needs to get rid of that building regardless. So yep.
Okay, Mr. Walker.
We have a picture here of a photo of a red cottage in front of a open water caution sign. Is that the cottage in question that you're going to tear down?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so, and you've mentioned that you're going to move that back from its existing footprint where it is now?
Yeah.
Show
And,
that picture.
yeah, if you'd like, I can share my screen and show you what the intent is. I can do that.
That might be helpful.
Yep. So that's that's the idea of the cottage that we want to build.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so it's a single story, and we don't want to go higher just because of how close it is to the lake. But sorry, I just show you the footprint. So you see here, this is the proposed screen and porch, and we want to move it back to here, and then we have some quite a few large trees back here that I'd prefer to keep. So that's the idea. And this is the other building that we're relocating. You can see in the dotted line, and we're going to put it
Yes.
over here.
So really, the only variance you're asking for is to have the screened-in porch area, if I see that right, to come into the setback from the high water mark. And
Exactly.
you are actually going to move, take the existing cottage out of that 66-foot or the setback from the high water. So
Yes.
your encroachment is very limited by the look of it. Is that correct?
Yes. So I'm allowed, I guess, the 60 feet, and I'd be going up to 66 feet with that porch.
So really, you're going to encroach approximately 6 feet on your new proposal, but you're eliminating quite a bit more from moving the cottage back.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that is simply a deck or a enclosed screen porch?
It's a covered porch.
A covered porch.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then, and that's really the only variance you're asking for. Is that correct?
Yes. And then as well as there's a second variance on the application for the relocating this building and making that a sauna. So it'd be a habitable building with a sauna.
So I guess I'm not quite clear on what that is outside of the setback, right? So you're.
Oh yeah. So that's a different. Yeah.
So what do we need? I guess I'm not quite understanding. What's the variance for? Just to reuse, like for a new use?
Because I have there's existing structures on the lot. So this I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but
Yep, Ken.
okay. So this building here, it's used for a habitable space. So I'm only allowed
Well, I see.
one.
So it's actually not a deck then. It's kind of a existing frame building with a deck on it, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So that's a sleeping bunkie right now, and I guess if I want to use a sauna is considered also a habitable building.
Okay. And you're not moving that existing frame building right now. It's not part of the plan.
No.
You're just changing the use of that. Is that correct?
No, I'm keeping the use of this existing frame building. I'll be moving this building here.
Right.
So that building is this building here, and I'll
Yes.
be moving it to this location and repurposing it as a sauna.
Okay.
But
Thanks
just
for the
just to
clarification.
clear- just to make it clear, Mr. Walker, what he's looking for is the width of the building of 66.6 feet.
So
Right.
that's my primary variance. Yes.
Bylaw only allows him 60.7.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm open on this, but my thinking is that we should really see this property. Mr. Bishop?
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I was going to ask the applicant a question, but through you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate his plan, and I was more clear on what he brought up on the screen. But even if he could take this cottage site and move it back that 6 feet, it would make a great deal of difference in regard to the visual aspect on the lake. That's why we look at it from the point of view of a lot visit. We can see whether or not there is any real constraints to moving it back. And I appreciate the applicant's position in terms of trying to preserve exactly where he's at. Mr. Walker's raised a few good points in that regard, but I'm not familiar exactly with this parcel. I've been on Hollow Kawagama Lake a lot of times and gone past this area, but I'd have to see it.
Okay, yeah, no, and I think it's because I guess I'd have to be beyond the 20-meter mark is the concern, right? So that's kind of where I don't really want to go beyond that 20-meter, because I'd have to clear out all the trees behind that cottage, and then you'd have the big clear area in front of it as well, right? So that's kind of where my concern was, and so.
Mr. Walker,
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. And I just wanted to clarify, the existing structure does have legal non-complying status with regards to our setback. So he's not required to move it back 20 meters. If he did, it would open up a lot more flexibility and options for him within the context of the bylaw. I guess a question is it possible to alter the dimensions of your building so that you don't need a variance for development within a water setback with that 6 feet? I know you're starting with a bit of a clean slate. Can you change those dimensions and keep it at that distance, and then you wouldn't even need minor variance?
Yeah, I was talking to our designer about that, and with the intended design, I guess we have we have a master bedroom, the kitchen, and the living room and the screen and porch. All one side is kind of facing the water, so we'd have to kind of either go up, or which we don't really want to go up, to kind of achieve that, right? So we wanted to keep it as a bungalow. So
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other comments on this, or are you of the premise that we should visit this property? Any member? Maybe we could go early as the ice is out. I mean, as far as that part goes. Mr. Bishop?
I would prefer a visit as far as that's concerned, Mr. Chair, so we can actually see what the visual effect is going to be, and whether or not with the applicant with us can say, can we do this and can we do that? I appreciate that he doesn't want to do a complete redesign, and it is a well-designed recreational property building. But let's have a look at all the topography that's there. And I appreciate that he maybe doesn't want to take away more trees at the back, but it's not the trees at the back that we're concerned about. It's the tree cover at the front that we're worried about.
yeah, and
Visual
that wouldn't be changed. We wouldn't be removing any trees at the front, because we don't. With this intended design, I guess we don't have any big trees we have to get rid of. So.
Well, if the committee is okay with going for a site meeting at the earliest possible convenience, as soon as the ice is out, I'm sure we can straighten this out. I think we can work with this gentleman and probably solve this problem and work with that. Just to be clear, the sauna building that you're going to turn in, what is it going to be, like a sleeping cabin?
No, I'm going to be turning it into a sauna. So right
Or
now
you're
it's
putting
just
it into a sauna?
yeah.
Okay.
It was a temporary as my pump house, I guess. We brought a pump up there, and
Most people want their sauna a little closer to the lake.
yeah.
Sorry, can't help you there. Jeff?
And I just wanted to clarify for the committee with regards to the sauna. So under our municipality went through their comprehensive zoning bylaw update at the end of last year. I think it was approved in November or December. Under the previous bylaw, a sauna was permitted as private cabin. What the zoning bylaw says is an accessory building can't be used for habitation unless specifically permitted. And the only thing permitted is a private cabin. And the new definition for private cabin talks about overflow sleeping accommodations. So a sauna is no longer considered a private cabin. It might be something that staff overlooked at the time. So it's something we're going to take back to council in the future and have them consider whether they want to include saunas as a permitted use on property. So I just wanted to give that background as to why this is coming up.
Well, maybe, Mr. Orson?
And just something to consider for committee too when going out there. I know that some of the ask has been like maybe pushing it back and removing trees, but sometimes that when you're considering that may be more of an impact to to the environmental area, causing erosion, whereas just using the existing location and then slightly modifying or extending off of that may be less impact. So just something to consider while you're out there as well.
Good point.
Mr. Bishop?
Going back to Mr. Chair with the comments by Jeff, you go through the definitions, and the definition of habitation includes leisure, recreational, home entertainment, etc. activities. So it's a rather broad statement. And the use and occupied definitions includes words to be designed to be used, and occupied means designed to be occupied. So I don't know how we're going to overcome for this applicant the concerns in regard to the sauna. I've been told by people from the Scandinavian countries that it's a sauna. So I think the applicant should look at those definitions, because if we are looking to grant a dispensation in that regard, it has to meet the tests, of course. But in addition, if we decided that it meets the test, then it meets the test for everybody. So that's another concern that you might have.
Well, maybe if we buy the time, we can sort the whole issue out, but are we agreed that we want to do a site visit with the property? Can you give me some indication? Yes? Mr. McKechnie? Are you okay with?
Yeah, I like to ask a question. Like, so what we're discussing here is him moving it back 6 more feet. Is that what you're like, instead of art?
What he's asking for is the width of the building. Okay, and the 6 feet comes into it, because if he did back it up, he doesn't even need us. He can do whatever he wants. But I think that like we're talking about the man in the moon until you see the property. I think that's all. Jeff?
Yeah, just to clarify for you, Mr. McKechnie, so if you look at the 2 site plans provided, or even the one which shows the proposed development, you can see the existing structure that's kind of underneath it. So right now there's a smaller structure that's located, I think, over 10 meters from the lake. They do want to move it back a little bit and make it considerably larger. The dimensions proposed for the new development actually exceed the required width by 6 feet or so. I can't recall exactly. But that's essentially what they're asking for, is to go 6 feet wider than is permitted by the bylaw within the water setback.
And how big is this lot?
It's 2 acres.
2 acres.
Yeah.
You got a lot of property there.
Yeah. It's a big island.
And we're worried about 6 feet.
Someone make a motion with respect to this application that we defer it and pending a site visit as early as possible in the year.
I would make that motion, Mr. Chair.
It's moved and seconded. Do you have a float boat, Mike?
Sorry?
You have a pontoon boat?
I do, yes. Yeah.
So if you come to the meeting, can you get up here and meet us and take us over there and stuff?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And we can go as early as possible. If you just coordinate it with Jeff.
Sure. Okay.
And hopefully we'd have an answer for you on the sauna at the same time when Jeff will check that all out.
Okay. And I'll leave the existing building. Right now I have the windows out and I have the insulation out, but I'll leave the existing frame for everybody to see.
Well, do you want us to bring a hammer and saw? Is that what you suggest?
Yeah, I prefer that. That'd be great. Need a hand.
Leave it to you and Mr. Isles to coordinate the visit, and we'll carry on from there. So you don't have to reapply or anything else. It'll just be deferred based on that. Mr. Bishop?
Since it's going to be in the spring, I'd like to ask the applicant if I can bring my copper line. Just a
Perfect,
little-
yeah.
I don't think you want him fishing out there. Okay, so with it's moved and seconded, that moved by Mr. Bishop and seconded by Mr. Walker, that both variances with respect to D13 MV 2021-002, Mr. Boy, be deferred. Carried? 1, 2, 3. Carried. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. See you in the spring.
You bet.
Okay, bye.
There we are. I don't know who moved it, but somebody did.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, we got the Treadway application?
Yep.
And this is, who's the agent on that?
There is no agent. It would be Dane Treadway, is one of the property owners,
Property owner, Dane Treadway.
and he is on the meeting.
Are you there, Dane?
I'm here.
Can you just give us a quick synopsis on where we're going here, and we'll carry on from there.
Yeah, absolutely. We took possession of the property this summer, and we were told at the time that both the mudroom and the deck were in poor shape and would need to be replaced at some stage. So it's our hope to do that, and in doing so, we need to secure a minor variance to reflect the existing dwellings that are on the property. It seems that the minor variances that were granted in 1982 don't actually reflect what's going on here. So we had a surveyor out in the fall, and yeah, so that's where we're here.
Okay, any questions, gentlemen? So are you still there, Dane?
I'm here, yeah. Sorry, maybe my signal here is terrible, so the video is not working. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay.
Jeff?
Yeah, and prior to proceeding, I just want to note that we can outline the proposed conditions and the public comments if you like.
Okay,
And Danielle, the Deputy Secretary Treasurer, is going to read those out for everybody.
okay.
The notice of circulation of minor variance was circulated as per the Planning Act, and we have received no comments on this application as of today. So staff comments and recommendations on this file is that given the history of development pertaining to the existing dwelling, we believe that the requested variances for the water setback complies with the general intent of the official plan. Should the committee decide to request variances, the following conditions would be appropriate. The variances apply to the seasonal dwelling as shown generally on property sketch dated February 8th and attached to the decision. Any encroachment beyond the variance granted herein will require further application for minor variance. The County of Haliburton Shoreline Tree Preservation Bylaw 3505 applies. During construction, property site preparation and construction methods are to be used to prevent sedimentation of the adjacent lake. Sediment fencing is to be installed down the gradient from construction of the site. The site is to be properly stabilized immediately following construction to prevent erosion and sedimentation. All future additions or reconstructions of the dwelling shall comply with section 3.19, the legal non-complying structures and lots of the zoning bylaw 2005-120. The applicants are to obtain a building permit for the reconstruction of the mudroom and deck, and the applicants agree to implement a 1 meter planting strip to screen the mudroom from view from neighboring properties.
Okay. Anybody have a question, Mr. Bishop?
I really don't have any question, Mr. Chairman, but I would bring forth some comments that I have written down here. This parcel, as we are aware, was the subject of a previous application. I understand the applicant is not the author of making it not comply with that setback that was allowed earlier from 56, 57 feet, but that he has now discovered that it's at the 50 feet. I am pleased that we've got a surveyor confirming that that is the correct distance. I'm thinking in my mind's eye that if under the original application, they had come forth with an application to allow a 50-foot setback, would the committee at that time have granted it? I'm looking at the policies that were in place at that time and the policies that are in place at this time. And it would appear that the concepts of strictly adhered to in the policy that's presently in place in regard to shoreline setbacks was not applicable at the time of this original application. Keeping that in mind, I would think that if it had have come in front of the committee at that time, they would have approved of it at the 50 feet. I still think that it would still meet the 4 tests that are involved in this application to move it to the 50 feet. And the other thing that it appears to me that there are some physical constraints on this particular parcel of land. It's rather steep. And some of the construction is more than likely governed by virtue of that configuration of the lands. It's unfortunate, of course, that it was not done properly at the original time. But having regard to those items and the policies that were in effect in 1982, subject to the conditions as suggested by our planning department, I would move, Mr. Chair, that we accept this application and approve the minor variance as applied for.
The seconder for the motion? Second by Mr. Walker. Okay. Be it resolved, the committee's decision with respect to file D. Does anybody else have any other material that they wish to put on the floor before we finish off here? In defense of the applicant, the previous people actually did get a permit for all of this, so I think maybe there's some jogging back and forth. So it's been moved and seconded that the decreased provision of section 5.2 to permit a dwelling to have a minimum water setback of 15.3 meters as opposed to required 17 meters as permitted by minor variance D13 MV 198208 is granted. Hold up your hands. Carried. Decreased provision section 5.2 to permit a dwelling to have an interior side lot line setback of 3.2 meters as opposed to required 4.5 meters is granted. Carried. Are you there, Dane?
I am indeed, yes.
I think we're all finished.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you for your attendance today. Okay, now we go to Township of Harbor, Johnson and Larue. We got that's Julie Johnson.
I am bringing in all 3 property owners.
Julie, the first speaker.
I believe Leslie will be speaking on everyone's behalf.
Good morning, Julie. Are you one of the owners of this property?
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Leslie. I can speak on behalf of the owners of the property, my sisters and I.
Okay.
Okay, so can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you. I think there's a fair bit of history to all this, so if somebody wants to start the conversation, then we're prepared to listen.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you. So my name is Leslie Larue, and my 2 sisters, so Julie Johnson and Kim Johnson, and I own lot 14 on Halliburton Lake. So my sisters, as you can see, are also on this call. So our property was purchased by our late parents in 1969, so just over 50 years ago, and then was inherited to my sisters and I 8 years ago after our mom passed on and our dad before that. So we have a garage on the property. The garage was built in 2003 by our parents. So approaching almost 20 years that the garage was built, and was built with all applicable permits. So in the fall of last year, so 2020, we were notified by Robert Masaya, sorry if I've said his name wrong, that a complaint was issued on our garage by the neighbor, and to apply for a minor variance. So of course, at that time, we did our due diligence to have our lot lines run and to see, what the issue was. So we found at that time that the corner of our eaves trough, which is next to the forest, overhangs onto the neighbor's property. So today we are applying for a minor variance for our garage lot line setback. And we're definitely prepared to remove the eaves trough overhang if that is required. We can have that work done immediately. And we're happy to address anything else that's required or answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Do you have a survey? Has the property been surveyed?
Not the entire property, we had that line run.
Nobody had surveyed where the garage is.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
The garage is all on your property except for there's 11 inches or something setback?
Yeah, so it's just the corner of the eaves trough that overhangs onto the neighbor's property.
If the garage is encroaching on the other person's property, that's something that we can't deal with. But I'll let Jeff Isles respond to all that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And through you, as per the previous application, we're going to outline the notice and circulation requirements from the public, as well as just go through those conditions for everybody to talk about. But at your request, right, the committee can't permit encroachments, and they're not here to necessarily speak about an encroachment. They're going to be focusing on the variances requested, which is a variance for 0.92 feet from the side lot line, as well as that garage to have a street setback, which is more of a technicality. But before we move on, the Deputy Secretary Treasurer is going to outline the public comments received. And I believe we do have one member of the public in attendance today, and Danielle can elaborate on that.
Perfect. So this application was circulated as per the Planning Act. We did receive, we do 2 public comments. We have a comment from Rob Wagner, who maintains the road and says that the garage does not affect snow plowing. Then we do have Lynn Fagan in attendance, who wishes to comment on the application.
Okay.
Before I bring her into the meeting, I will read out the recommendations and the conditions from the staff. So staff are of the opinion that the variance generally conforms with the provisions of the official plan and zoning bylaw. If all the conditions are met to increase privacy and prevent trespassing, the requested variances are considered to be minor and desirable. So the conditions that we are recommending is that these variants apply to the seasonal dwelling in the garage as shown on the property sketch. Any encroachments beyond the variance granted here will require a further application for a minor variance. The tree preservation bylaw is to be considered. Prior to the work order being closed, the applicants must submit confirmation from an Ontario land surveyor that the private garage complies with the interior lot line setback and street setback. Prior to the work order being closed, the shed located within the minimum water setback is to be removed or brought into compliance. Prior to the work order being closed, the encroachment on the neighbor's property, the garage eaves, is to be removed and verified by an OLS that there are no encroachments. Prior to the work order being closed, the applicant agrees to implement a fence along the interior side lot line abutting the garage to screen the garage from neighboring properties. Prior to the work order being closed, the wall adjacent to the interior side lot line is to have no windows, no doors or openings. The garage door is to the interior side lot line is to be removed and enclosed. And the last condition is prior to the work order being closed, the drainage, including eaves, gutters, and downspouts for the garage are to be directed onto and towards the applicant's property.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't have anything to add other than maybe, I guess we could ask the applicants whether they had any comments or questions about the condition.
Are those conditions acceptable to you, ladies?
Hi, it's Leslie again. So yeah, absolutely. So we can definitely remove the east trough. We'll make sure that overhang or the downspouts go onto our property. The fence is no problem. The garage door, so we were hoping, we read that in the agenda. We were hoping that instead of permanently removing the garage door, there's no windows in the door. We were hoping instead we can permanently seal the door so that it can no longer be used. Our recommendation has come to us to frame the inside of the door so that it can no longer be used, so that the garage still looks cosmetically good. If you can imagine, you know, after 20 years, there's really no possibility of matching the siding. And that would be a massive expense.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I was just going to note, there is a proposed condition that requires a fence to screen that building from the neighboring property. So perhaps you guys, the committee could consider whether that fence would be sufficient enough and that they wouldn't have to remove that door. Again, I defer that to committee. And I just wanted to make you aware one more time that we do have the neighbor here who wishes to speak to. So.
Okay, so we can hear from the neighbor.
Yep, I can bring the neighbor in. Yep, just bringing her into the meeting now.
Hi, Lynn.
Lynn, you are on mute. May you unmute yourself?
Hold on. Okay, now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Anyway, I'll be really brief. You've hopefully have received my points of concern and the timeline that I've been trying to work on a reasonable solution for many years without result. A variance was not what I wanted the outcome to be, but I do appreciate what's going on and their solutions. I just really wanted my opportunity to say my side of the story and to have that recorded. And their proposal, I would like that garage door to be removed. That's my only spot to build my own little carport. That's the only other option I have, and I need a bit more parking. So I have been forced now to dig in further because they've put it on my property. And also just a question about when it said that all things were complied with. The original submission showed 20 feet back from my lot line, which obviously didn't happen. So yeah, I just really wanted to make sure that people knew my side of the story and how hard I've worked to try to have a peaceful outcome amenable to both of us.
Okay, Jeff?
I'm done.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. And I just wanted to clarify the intent of some of the conditions.
Okay.
In regards to the door. So as staff have recommended that there be a fence installed along that lot line between the garage and your property. Therefore, whether that door is removed or not, it would not be usable for.
Okay, I'm okay with that, but the fence you're talking about would have to go right against their building. Does everyone understand that? Like it's got to go right against and basically cover the garage door. Does everybody get that? Yeah.
I think I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
If they take the door out, they don't need a fence. Was that the idea?
Well, no, I don't. Either way is fine. If this is the way it's going to go, I'm just saying the fence has got to go right against the garage door so that it's kind of obliterated, that we can't see it, that people, yeah, anyway.
Okay, well, we'll leave it as a condition.
Okay.
So you guys, do they have to remove it or just immobilize it?
And we're referring to the door.
Yeah.
I guess that's up to the committee. Staff have recommended that condition, but given the request from the applicant and the concerns from the neighbor, it is, again, a committee decision. But if the fence is completely screens that building, makes that door unusable,
Yes.
then staff are fine without that, but again, it is a committee decision.
Well, I don't think we have to make it so that they remove it then, and then make it immobile or unusable.
Yeah.
So are you okay with that? If we put the fence up, make the garage door so that it's not usable?
Yeah, that has to happen from my point of view because it opens onto my property. So, yeah.
Well, other ladies, are you happy with that?
Yeah, that's no problem.
And Leslie, are you okay with that?
Yes, that's no problem.
Dave?
Pardon?
I just want to make sure it's aesthetically pleasing. That's all.
Okay, we got Mr. Bishop here.
Mr. Chair, in regard to conditions on fencing, I think we have to be very careful in regard to where that fencing is located, because if it's fenced on the line, we have the application of the Line Fences Act, and that has to be something that is consented to by both owners, and there would have to be an agreement as to the maintenance of that fence. So if there's going to be fencing, my warning is the fencing should be located entirely on the applicant's lands, set off from the line by a particular distance. They also have to keep in mind that when they offset it from the line, if it needs to be maintained from the side of Ms. Fagan's property, they're going to have enough room to maintain it without trespassing on Miss Fagan's lands. So let's be careful about the concepts of fencing as to where it's to be put and how it's to shield the Fagan lands from the use of this garage, which somehow went from 20 feet to 11 inches. I just don't know how we get to that problem, and maybe these young ladies can't really answer that question. But I put danger in the concepts of the fencing unless we comply with all the rules on the Line Fences Act.
Well, they've got the survey, so they should be able to go by that. Jeff?
Thank you, Chair. And I asked the committee, we could reword the condition that it be one or the other, that they either remove the door, windows, openings, or install a fence. And the fence would have to comply with the other act, obviously. As Committee Member Bishop said, it would have to be on their property. So we could reword it one or the other, but you may want to ask the neighbor if she has any comments on that.
Ms. Fagan, are you okay with that if we give them a choice, one or the other?
Ms. Fagan, may you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry. I want the view of that big garage hidden, that's all. I will not be putting up a big, huge garage. Eventually, I want a very tasteful little carport, and that thing is just this huge monster that I face every day, and it's right on my property. So I don't know what I would prefer. It just needs to be blocked out. But I think I like the idea of the fence, but if they have to put it on their property, once again, that garage is butting right up onto my property. So I don't know how that would work. It would have to be shoved right up against the garage door to make it what you were saying about on their property. Otherwise, it'll be all on my property.
Oh, you have to replace the door. Have to take the door out.
Applicants would like to speak, Chair.
But
the applicants do.
comment. We think visually it would probably just look best if we framed in the garage door and sealed it off so you can't open it.
Is that okay?
Yeah, and I also, if I may, if you, like, when you drive up to the property, you'll see like it's an odd lot, right? So the way our garage is right over from the neighbor's cottage property, right?
No, but it was supposed to be 20 feet back and it's right on my property. I just want to make everyone clear of that. That's what happened. And
So if I could continue to speak.
sure.
I don't know what happened 20 years ago. All I can say is we found that there were permits issued and closed for the garage. So we do know that. What happened in those conversations 20 years ago, we can't attest to that. Happy to seal off the garage so that aesthetically it looks good from both sides of the property, and the door would no longer be usable. If that makes sense.
Well, we're prepared to grant you the variance that makes it okay for you to move on. The question is, do we want a condition of one or the other, or what do we want with respect to this? Committee members, Mr. Bishop?
Frankly, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted an explanation, and then I'll move forward. But how a submission for that garage, which was 20 feet back from my property, got approved, built, and now I'm the one that's, paying for it in a way. So I just an explanation.
Well, what would make you happy?
Well, my initial want was for them to move the garage back or cut it in half, because that's my only other spot for parking. So, but I appreciate that that's a big pain. Yeah, I mean, that was always my wish, that they would move the garage or cut it back. You were told that. And the 2 points that were from the bylaw officer, he only gave 2 options for them. One, to move the garage or remove the garage, or convince me to sever part of my land. So this third option of the minor variance was I didn't even know about it until like a few days ago. So that was never on the table. So I'm just a little bit confused about why the bylaw officer said that those were their only 2 options and they would have to choose between one of those. But now all of a sudden it's a minor variance. So yeah, I guess I'm just a bit confused about the whole deal, how it got.
The reason they need a minor variance is you probably can't sell the land without it. So.
No, for sure. But I mean, again, like I didn't even know they were selling the property. The sign appeared overnight. I'd had a conversation with the girls in the driveway. No mention was made that they were selling. Wake up the next day, the sign is up, and the real estate agent, according to when I spoke to him, he was not aware of this encroachment. So of course I'm getting a little nervous about it at that point and wondering what's going on.
To a conclusion here, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Fagan. We're kind of veering off topic a bit here.
I appreciate that.
We're here to discuss a setback at 11 inches. Staff has proposed some conditions to help mitigate that setback. With regards to the minor variance option, the applicants through the Planning Act have the option to apply for a minor variance to be heard by the Committee of Adjustment. So this is why we're here today. And again, we need to stay focused on the variances that have been requested, the conditions that have been proposed, and try and not veer too far from that.
All right.
Chris Orson.
Yeah, I just want to point out, and actually Jeff just hit it, is that if you were to build today, it would be 1 meter from the property line, so it's 0.72 different, 0.72 meter difference. And you can speak to what the past was, but that's today's standards would be if they were to, even if they were to remove it and rebuild it, it would be a meter from the property line. So that's what the discussion is today.
Okay, so anybody else got any other comments for Mr. Bishop?
I want to address something to Ms. Fagan. I appreciate what her concerns are, and I appreciate her frustration in respect of what she thinks has happened on the neighboring property. My suggestion to you is no matter what happens here at this particular committee meeting, is that you bring your concerns up to council and tell them what their bylaw people said to you and bring it forth to council.
Okay.
It's a problem for us to deal with it here in terms of a conversation that you had with the bylaw officer.
Okay,
We appreciate exactly what you're saying about the 20 feet, that the application was apparently in the beginning for 20 feet. But as Mr. Orson has said here right now, if they were to start right today, they would be allowed to be 3 feet from that line, roughly, okay? And
Okay.
that would still have the same effect or what you consider to be a detrimental effect on your property. It's just that now it's a foot and a half closer, if you know what I mean, okay?
Okay, well,
So
let's,
I hope that that helps you to some extent, Ms. Fagan.
yes, thank you.
okay,
Um,
so do you want to amend any of the conditions, Jeff, or do you want to?
Well, and I'm going to seek a bit of direction here because the applicants and the neighbor have differing opinions with regards to the conditions regarding the door and the fence. So I seek direction from the committee members how they want to proceed with those two conditions. You can include them both, you can include one or the other, you can include one but not the other. So yeah, I seek direction from you guys how you want to proceed.
I'd say give them a joy. What do the rest of you guys think? Jerry?
I think, given the option of 4, if that's okay.
Mr. McKay?
The other option, the other,
Oh, it's
Sorry,
freezing.
Dave, do you wish to?
Everything's frozen.
So that's the way you're going to do it. Anyway, let's get on with the file on hand. And the following variances with respect to file D13 MB 2020-17 are recorded as follows. The following variances are requested to legalize the location of existing private garage on a lot located in the WR4L zone. The decreased provision of section 5.2 to permit a private garage with a minimum interior lot setback of 0.28 meters as opposed to required minimum of 1 meter. Granted, carried. 1, 2, 3. The decreased provision of section 3.30 to permit a private garage to have a minimum street setback from Indigo Lane of 0.73 meters as opposed to required minimum of 7.5 meters is granted. Carried. 1, 2, 3.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
I just want, before we just close out this, I just want to make sure that everybody understands what the conditions are. So he's going to read them again. But anyway, we'll hear from you first.
Okay.
So make them the choice.
Did you want to hear, sorry, did you want to hear from committee member Bishop first, or did you want us to read the conditions first?
Well, we'll hear from David first. Or do you want the conditions? You.
Okay.
Just so everybody understands what's required here.
Thank you, and I'm going to defer that to Danielle, the Deputy Secretary Treasurer, to read out those conditions for everyone again.
I'll read out all of the conditions again. So the variance applies to the private garage as shown generally on the property sketch dated December 9th. The County of Haliburton Tree Preservation Bylaw applies. Prior to the work order being closed, the applicant must supply confirmation from an OLS that the private garage complies with the interior lot line setback and street setback. Prior to the work order being closed, the shed located within the minimum water setback is to be removed or brought into compliance. Prior to the work order being closed, the encroachment on the neighboring property, garage eaves, is to be removed and verified by an OLS that the encroachments are resolved. Prior to the work order being closed, the applicant agrees to implement a fence along the interior side lot line abutting the garage to screen the garage from neighboring properties, or the wall adjacent to the interior side lot line is to have no windows, no doors, no openings. The garage door adjacent to the interior side lot line is to be removed or enclosed. Prior to the work order being closed, the drainage, including eaves, gutters, downspouts for the garage are to be directed onto and towards the applicant's property. So those conditions are now an or, is that correct?
It's or, one or.
One
Yeah.
or, okay.
And sorry, just to be clear, instead of removing the door, we're allowed to seal it and frame it in?
You either gotta remove it or put a fence up.
Okay. Do we have the option to seal the door, to frame it in on the inside?
Well, I think you make it immovable. I don't know.
Yeah, so we've been talking to, when we saw that condition, we talked to someone, they said, you know, you can frame it on the inside, so it will no longer be usable. You can't open it or close it. There's no windows in it, so nothing from a privacy. We're just quite concerned about removing it because we would never be able to match the siding. And it's very expensive.
David.
Who has questions?
I would like the door to be.
Did you have a question?
Oh, David.
Did you have a question?
Mr. Chair?
I'm not sure who's asking here. Yeah. Yeah. Can I get an idea of the timeline of this, whatever work is to be done?
Well, the conditions say prior to the work order being removed, so that work order on the property will exist until these conditions are met. There are also a condition of approval of the minor variance. So
Right.
if you go through and look at the conditions that have been proposed, you'll see the timeframes associated with them.
Oh, okay, I missed that. Okay.
And Chair, Committee Member Bishop has a question.
Mr. Bishop?
Mr. Chairman, to address the applicant's question in regard to the doorway, it's a lot cheaper to enclose the doorway so that it doesn't exist rather than moving the garage to comply with the zoning setback from the line.
I think you're probably right. What do we want to do?
So would you like the condition to still read as prior to the work order being closed, the wall adjacent to the interior side lot line is to have no doors, no windows or openings. The garage door adjacent to the interior side lot line is to be removed and enclosed.
There you go.
Is that how you would like the condition to be read?
Well, we want it right, but we want to make sure these people understand it, that's all.
Yeah, my understanding, or erect a fence between them. So it's one or the other. Remove it or erect a fence.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
what
the feeling I'm getting.
Is everybody clear on that? You
Yes.
gotta either take it out of there or put a fence up,
Okay.
okay?
And the fence seems to be a problem.
I don't know that the fence is the problem because I'm not gonna be building it, but
No, okay. Sounded like the fence might be an issue, so that's all.
if the fence is a problem, they go the other route and then it fixes
Yeah,
the
okay.
garage up, so it's closed in.
Gotcha.
Mr. Walker?
I would just think it would be less expensive to close the door off, actually remove it and frame it than it would be to build fence.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that we make that a condition that it is removed and then you don't have a fence that is going to be questionable at a later time.
I agree.
Okay, we okay?
I know we're having a lot of discussion about these conditions,
So
so
we've got 3 people here, so.
I just want to seek clarification, and it's up to the board committee members to kind of vote on this condition, whether it's one or the other, whether it's both, or one and not the other. So do we want to give them the option of putting up a fence? If they can't, they have to remove it, or remove it no matter what, as Mr. Walker was suggesting. I look to the 4 committee members maybe to have a vote on this.
Okay, so let's get this all settled. Can we have an indication from each one of the committee members which route you would like to go with, the door or the fence? Mr. Bishop?
Go for the door, get rid of the door, and then we're not fooling around with the fence.
Mr. Walker?
I concur with Mr. Bishop. Get rid of the door and forget about the fence.
Mr. McCagney. Through the door. Okay, it's the door. Got to remove.
Yes, thank you.
Is everybody clear on that? That's the way it is.
Okay.
Are there any other questions with respect to
Here.
the application? So, Leslie?
I have a question about the shed that was mentioned on the property. So I believe the condition was to remove the shed. So I just wanted to get some clarity on that, if that's okay. So that shed, it's quite a small shed. It's been there for 40, 50 years. We were thinking, should that not be, sorry, grandfathered in? You can also see from the photos that, the neighbors also have a shed the same size right up against ours. It's just a little shed used to store, life jackets, water safety items.
So we got it, Jeff?
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. And thank you, Leslie. The municipality has no building permit or assessment information for that shed, so we really don't have any record of how long it's existed. So given our records, there's no proof that it has legal non-compliant status with the water setback. So to actually remain in that location would require a minor variance to the water setback. And given that that wasn't circulated for this meeting today, it would actually have to be recirculated and brought back for the committee to consider.
Can I just ask a question? Because my understanding of what was required for a permit was a building that was more than 102 square feet. This shed would be about 70 square feet. So,
correct. It does not need a building permit, but it does still need to comply with the zoning bylaw. And that's why we say both. We look at both whether or not it has a building permit. Also, we look at the assessment records, and we have neither. So it would be up to the applicants and yourselves to provide proof to the municipality that that building's existed in that location since prior to July 11th, 1977, for it to have some sort of grandfathered status. If not, a variance, as I mentioned, would be required to the water setback to permit it to stay in that location.
Yeah, but we tell them to move anyway. It's just in the water setback. Shouldn't we?
Well, if it has legal non-compliant status, it could stay there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's no circulated variance before the committee today to make that decision. So if you can provide proof to the municipality that that building does have legal non-compliant status, then it would satisfy that condition that it's been brought into compliance.
We can search for something.
So I just basically said, if they can provide proof to the municipality that that building's existed in that location unchanged since prior to 1977, July 11th, 1977, then it would satisfy that condition because that building would be legal non-compliant in that location.
Well, good work, right? You don't have anything else?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so. I look for a motion for adjournment. I think the business is all completed. Someone can move it. Moved by Mr. Bishop, second by Mr. Walker. The meeting be now adjourned at 12:20. No, 12:40. Thank you very much for your attendance. And hopefully we won't see you next month. 12:40.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you.